Okay, we're on the bottom of 11a, Yid Aleph Amud Aleph. The Gemara is still in the process of dissecting the verses that describe the beginning of the Jewish enslavement. We went step by step in explaining each line and each word. So we're still in that process right now. The verse we're specifically quoting now is a verse which reads, Exodus chapter 1, verse 11. By Simu Olav started Misim, and he placed upon them taskmasters, Lamana Noisoi, in order to inflict them Bisivloisam in their stress or pain or work. By even, and they built Arden Miskanais, warehouse cities or like storage cities, the Pare for Pare, as Pisaim, Ves Ramses, Pitom, and Ramses. So we analyzed each of these lines. By Simo love, he placed upon them. The word for them is alav in the singular on him, which alludes to the fact that he put upon himself this mold for bricks, feigning as if he was working with them. And that was the meaning of the word Sardei Misim, which doesn't just mean taskmasters, but also means that which invokes servitude, because this mold that he had on his neck compelled the Jews to work. And then Laman Anoisai, in order to inflict them, again it's in the singular, to inflict himself, as if he is cursing others, but really, or cursing himself, that he's going to get punished, but he's putting it upon others, on the Jews. And then it says that they built storehouses, cities, and that was the last comment we had. And the word for storehouse or for storage is miskanais, which can translate as dangerous or impoverishment. And thus we have two translations. The first being that buildings endanger those who build them. Number two, building projects are expensive and thus they impoverish those who build them. Those are the two translations. And we talked a little bit about how this might be in literal meaning versus context. The first one being literal, the second one being context, and following with the Rebbe's teaching about Rav and Shmuel in general, when they discuss verses, that one's the first one context, the second one, first one literal, second one context. So we try to perhaps explain that. And I'm pointing that out now because we're about to read another dispute between Rav and Shmuel with respect to this very verse. So the last four words of the verse is Es Pisan the Es Ramses. It's exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom of the page, third to last word. Es Pisan the Es Ramses. The cities that they built were the word S, Aleph stuff is hard to translate it, but I think I thought of this translation, and maybe I'm wrong, and if someone says a better one, please, happy to hear. But I think the word S can be translated as a semicolon, like a kind of semicolon. Es Pisem, the city of Pisem, Ves Ramses and Ramses. So it's like a semicolon, I think is the best way to put it. It's a kind of breaker in a sentence. So these are the names of on the simple surface of it, these are the names of the cities that the Jews built, Pitom and Ramses. Now, Rav and Shmuel were discussing this, and both of them seem to insist, and I'm not 100% sure why, but they seem to insist it's one place. It's not two different places.
They both think that?
Yes, they both say that it's one place. The question is only, what's its original name, what's its actual name, and what is a description? And they each choose a different one to be the name versus the description. So let's see. Chadam, the first one, which in the Rebbe's line of reasoning would be the literal translation. He says, Pitom Shema. Its name is Pisam or Pitom. That's the name of the city. Now, the Lomanukar Shema Ramses. So why is it called Ramses? Because Sherishon Rishon Misroises. The word Ramses comes from the word Roises, which means to or like fall apart. So as they would build the layers of brick, it would fall apart, requiring them to build it again. Right? That's pretty sure that's the direct translation is to crumble, or to like fall apart. Let me have a look. Just give me 1 second. I'll have a look. It's the bottom of 11a. Looking at Resh Steinsaltz's comment translation. Yeah, collapsed. So one by one it would collapse. Okay, so that's the first one. Pitam is the name, Ramses is the title because it would fall apart as they built it. So that's the first version. The Chad Amar, the other version is all the way around.
That Shmuel is the next one?
It would be Shmuel. Shmuel, it would seem, and this is the one who would go with context rather than literal, that Ramses Shema, the name is Ramses. But Shema Pitam, so why was it referred to as Pitam? Why is that its title? Because each one, as they would build it, as they would put it down, Pitahim, that's the word Pitam comes from. It's a combination of the word Pitahim, which means the opening of the depth, as in like the earth itself. Boiloi would swallow it. So there's very little in the ways of difference between the two, other than one says it crumbled versus one saying it was swallowed in the ground.
Sounds both foundational issues. Whatever they built on
Yeah.
this
So
ground.
that's the interesting. So that's right. So what's the difference between the two? Well, there's two differences, and maybe this will help us understand this. One is the first one the name, or the second one the title, the second one the name, and the first one the title. So I think if you're going to go with literal translation, it would probably be better to put the first one as the name, and then the title comes after, which is consistent. The first one says it's called Pitam, and the name Ramses is the title because it crumbled. That's difference number one. Whether you put the first one as the name and the second one as the description, or the other way around. And if you're going to go with literal, I would suppose you first put the name and then the description, right? So Pitam would be the description, the name, and then Ramses the description that the buildings crumble. Difference one. Difference two is that when you say the building crumbles, you're actually making a comment on the integrity of the actual building. Whereas, I think I just got my answer. Whereas when you say it, the earth falls it swallows it in, you're not talking about the integrity of the building, but you're talking about the land upon which it's built. The land is like quicksand or something, so swallows it up. And maybe there's a difference. To say that there's, in other words, in the literal meaning, it's better to say the first one is the name, and the second one is the description. The description is that it falls apart as you build it. But in context, why would you say that the Jews would deliberately build their own building with such poor quality? Contextually, it makes more sense that the Egyptians forced the Jews to build on land that they knew wouldn't survive and support the building. Right. No, it's because the first one is talking about the building itself crumbling. Why would the Jews do that? Why would the Jews build such bad quality buildings to compel them to build again? Seems kind of silly. So that's why contextually it doesn't make sense. It's better to say that the name is Ramses, but the name Pitam implies that the ground was faulty. And that would make sense because Pharaoh is forcing them to build on such ground, knowing that it's going to cause worse work because it's not going to last. The building's not going to last. So maybe that's the difference there. But I'm still left with the original question of why it all say it's one place? Why not say it's two different places, one called Pitam and one called Ramses? Why is it one place? Why do we have to say that? Especially since the verse earlier says, Vayiven Ardim Biskanais, they built cities of storage, plural. So I'm not sure why they're both compelled to say it's one place, just that one's in title, one's a description, and one's a name. I'm not sure why they're compelled to do that. I don't know. If someone has any thoughts on that, please feel free to share.
Aren't they both saying the opposite of each other? One is saying this is the name and this is
The description, yeah.
the name.
They are.
The description, the other says Ramses is the name.
Yeah, but they both insist that the words Pitam and Ramses are not two different places, which is what you would think when you read it just simply. Like Rashi on the Chumash. Yeah. What does Rashi on the Chumash say? Does Rashi on the Chumash say that they're one place or two locations? Let's see.
So don't they both seem to sound in context? And If you would
That's
say
the
the literal, it would be
two different. That's exactly my question. If we're going with context versus literal, why aren't we just saying that literal is that they're both just one?
No, they're two names. If it's literal.
It's what? Yeah. Why not just say it's two names, right?
But Rob and Shmuel are not fighting over context and literal. It seems like they're both in
Yes.
context.
So that's why I'm thinking that there must be something compelling them to say that it's one location. But then within that, there's context versus literal. And literal is better to say that the original name is
The original name is Ramses, you're saying.
so in the literal, the original name would be Pitom, because you want to put the first name as literal.
But you say that's not, that shouldn't be it should be contextual. Then.
That would be literal. So there's literal versus context. So the one that says literal puts Pitom as the actual name first, and then Ramses is the context. Ramses just means that it fell apart. But if you're going in context, it's better to say that Ramses is the real literal name, because it doesn't make sense that the Jews would build a building that's not structurally sound. It makes more sense that Pitom is the description that the earth opened up because Pharaoh forced them to build in a place that wasn't suitable.
So you're
in context.
more inclined to go with.
I'm not inclined to go with either of them. I'm just saying, using the Rebbe's line of reasoning, the first is literal, and the second one context. That's how I would explain it. Follow or not? Or not?
I'm not having a hard time.
Sorry. Okay, one second. Let's do this.
For whatever is the name and the description is Ramses.
Yes. Let's just go like this. For whatever reason, unbeknown to me right now, they are compelled to say that it's one location, not two. They are, as a matter of fact, before the discussion begins.
Yeah.
Now that they're in the discussion about that it's the same name, it's the same location, just one's a name and one's a description, which one's better to go with? Should I say that the first name is the actual name and the second one's a description? Or should I say the second one's the name and the first one's the description? So if you're going to go with literal meaning, after the premise they're both in the same place, then it's better to say that the first thing is the name and the second one's a description.
Why?
Because when you talk, that's what you talk.
Oh, yeah.
First, you give a name to something,
No,
and then you give a description to something.
Okay, sure.
So if you go to literal reading, that's how it is.
No,
First, okay. But in context, considering that the second name, Ramses, implies that the building itself is not structurally sound, contextually, why would you say that? In the context of the operation, why would the Jews be building something that's not structurally sound? So therefore, contextually, it's better to say that the earth is not sound. And that's indicated in the first word, pitam, which would therefore mean that the second word is the actual name. Putting in context better, but not in literal reading better. However, I'm just looking at Rashi now. Rashi on the Chumash. Welcome back, Alan. Rashi in the Chumash writes as follows: Pitam and Ramses, which were originally unfit for this.
Which is sorry?
Originally, the cities of Pitam and Ramses were unfit for storehouses. Okay, Rashi, let's just read the whole Rashi on this verse.
Like a marshland or something.
Exactly. Rashi, actually, a little bit different. Rashi actually says differently. So let's see. The verse says, so they appointed over them tax collectors or taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built store cities, like storehouses, for Pharaoh, namely Pitam and Ramses. Rashi translates, okay, goes on to this, storehouses. So he says how the word miskinos means storehouses.
Maybe.
Sources for that. And then he says on the words Pitam and Ramses, which were originally unfit for this, meaning originally the cities of Pitam and Ramses existed already, but they were unfit for storage. And then they compelled the Jews to strengthen them and fortify them for storage. So Rashi makes no comment about at least not on this verse, about the buildings falling apart. So, which leads me further to ask the question that if you're going to go with the literal reading, Pitam and Ramses are just two cities. So I'm still not sure as to why both Rav and Shmuel are compelled to say that they are one city, and then they switch in which one's the literal name and which is the description. I'm not sure on why that is.
And Rashi is saying we are two cities.
Yeah, Rashi seems to imply the two cities, as is the most literal meaning. That's what I'm saying. This discussion between Rav and Shmuel about literal versus context is only after they both accept the premise that it's one city, not two, which I'm not sure why, but that's what it is.
There aren't any other rabbis chiming in as to what.
I don't know. I'm sure maybe there's commentaries around this, and if someone knows, please share. Alan, you want to say something?
Yeah, I said they built buildings.
Yeah.
So the buildings were Pitam and Ramses.
Yeah, that's the simple reading, but both Rav and Shmuel insist. So the verse, 1 second, the verse does say store cities. So the names are the names of not the buildings, but the names of the cities, right? Are miskenos, storage, cities of storage. So Pitim and Ramses are names of cities, not of buildings. But nonetheless, like you're saying, Alan, the simple reading, as Rashi, we just saw from Rashi, is that there are two different cities. But for some reason, both Rav and Shmuel insist that it's one city, one in the description and one in the name. So I don't know why they go that way, that direction. But
it's amazing that they would build it like that because they were experts in building. I mean, they built the pyramids. If you've ever seen the pyramids, I mean, it's a huge thing.
Yeah, so I'm not.
They were experts.
Yeah, I'm not like I don't know what the historical source is for the idea that the pyramids that we have that we see today outside of Giza. Where is it? Giza, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what the historical data is to support the notion that those are the actual buildings that the Jews built, because I don't know. I don't know. Are they the ancient city of Ramses and Pisa and Pithom? Because there are ancient cities of Pithom and Ramses, right? There was a King Ramses and there was a city named after him. So I don't know if that is, but maybe it's likely they built pyramids because that's what Egyptians built pyramids. So it's likely Jews built pyramids then.
What's also interesting too is that, like Alan's saying, they had experience not only building pyramids, which are engineering wonders, but also these storehouses were built in Joseph's time.
That's right. They
should have had templates and things.
They probably did.
Storehouses.
They probably did.
Know where to put them.
Right. That's why I'm saying in the context, it makes sense that Pharaoh, just to torture the Jews, making them build it to begin with in marshland, they know it's going to fall apart.
It's more, that's a plausible.
Right. Rather than saying that the Jews themselves built it, built a building that wasn't structurally sound. But the literal meaning is better to say that the first word is the actual name. That's why I'm saying literal versus context. Yeah. Anyway, that's what we have. Okay, let's go forward.
Okay.
Third to last line. The next verse reads, the very next verse, chapter 1, verse 12, Exodus. Ukasher yanu osoi, and as they inflicted them, as the Egyptians inflicted the Jews, ken yirba, so they multiplied, b'chen yifritz, and so they expanded. That's the verse. They kept on growing. They kept on increasing their numbers. So the Gemara asks, Kain Rabu v'chein portzu b'baraloi. It should have said, so did they multiply, and so did they expand. The letter Yud at the beginning of the word, Yerba, the Yifratz, implies future tense. So they will continue, so they will expand. It should have been description in past tense, so they did multiply, so they did expand. Why is it in the future tense, not in the past tense, as is the rest of the story described in past tense or in present tense? So Gemara answers, Amar Shlokish. The Shlokish said, comments, Ruach HaKodesh Mevasasran, the holy energy of Hashem informs them that about the Jewish people. So too they will multiply, and so too they will continue. You here are trying to afflict them because you want to put an end to them. You should know it ain't going to work. They will stay on forever. They will continue to multiply. They will continue to grow. So it's not just a description of what happened, and that when they were there, they continue to expand, notwithstanding the affliction. But it's actually a prophecy for the Jewish future until this very day. All of you pharaohs, for all time, this ain't going to work. Future tense, they will expand, they will continue, Jews will still be here, even as Egypt disintegrates into whatever it is today.
Disintegrates
like these buildings, yeah. All pharaohs of all time should know this prophecy. It's not going to work. History should teach you by now that can try, but it's not going to happen.
Maybe that's also a measure.
Still here.
This crumbling of these buildings is also
measure for the crumblings of their empire.
Egyptian.
Yeah, the Egyptians had the Egyptians had high points after that, but nothing like world domination that they had at the time of the slavery in the really ancient world. But afterwards they were primarily vassals of other countries, either Persia or the Medes or the Greeks. They didn't have the same kind of dominion ever, even though they had high points in culture, certainly. like when Rambam was there, but not the same kind of dominance that they had when they were enslaving the Jews. Okay. Another comment from the Gemara.
Like in Alexandria times.
Yeah, like when Alexandria was doing well, Cairo too.
It's a very cultural.
Alexandria is a major cultural epicenter, so was Cairo. Jewish, not Jewish, it was a major centers of life, including Jewish life. The Cairo Geniza, right? You know the Cairo Geniza? This is a monumental discovery of the last century, where, so you know, as Jews, we don't throw out papers that have Hashem's name on it. And ordinarily what happens is, like we have here, we have a box and
You get buried.
yeah, the kiddush room, we put your papers, and then every once in a while we empty it out and bury it. Shemus, right? Geniza, Shemus. So over centuries, they would collect these papers were stored in the attic of a certain synagogue in Cairo. Never got buried. So there's hundreds of years of record in that attic with phenomenal discoveries of very early texts of Rambam and others, historical texts, Jewish texts, but also for some reason people kept contracts there also, presumably because the name of Hashem is in the top right corner, like, you know, by the grace of God. So even like regular ordinary contracts, receipts, bills are there. So you have a whole historical record of a few hundred years packed in there. There's so much, they still haven't finished deciphering it. You can go online and contribute to the deciphering, actually. There's a website where you can go. You do it. I've done it for the fun of it. Where they show you a picture and they ask you, what language is it? Are you familiar with the language? Is it right side up, upside down? They're like crowdsourcing the work of deciphering this, because there's just so much. But anyway, they're still discovering.
What's this website?
Search Cairo Geniza crowdsourcing deciphering. You'll come up.
You could also search Ben Ezra Synagogue in Cairo.
That's the synagogue where they found it.
That's where I was. I was there.
Wow.
It was incredible. It
Cairo
went way back.
Online. I'm Googling it. Crowd source. Let's see if it comes up.
Google the Ben Ezra Synagogue.
Found it here. I'll find the way. Wait. I can't find it. I'll find the website and I'll post it. It's fascinating. I've done it before. Someone sent it to me once. Actually, and that's not true. I was watching a lecture once where someone explained this website, and I went to check it out and used it for just to have fun of it. But anyway, all to say that the Egyptians had high puts in culture, but nothing like they had at the time. Not the world dominance they had in the ancient world. Okay. Another comment from the Gemara. So the next verse, or the end of that verse, is as they were afflicted, so they will multiply and expand. And the verse concludes the Vayakutsu Mipnei Bnei Yisrael, and the word Vayakutsu, in its literal meaning, means like and they were like nauseous. Vayakutsu, and the word Yakutsu is used to describe someone who's like repelled, like what's the word, like something finds repulsive.
Repugnant.
Yeah, repugnant. You find something repugnant, and this is the Egyptian response. Vayakutsu, they were repulsed because of the Jewish people, because as much as they tried to afflict them, it wasn't working. They were just expanding, so they were like disappointed. So explains the Gemara like this: that this word Vayakutsu also can mean thorn, and therefore it says like this. This Melamed, this teaches us. Last line: the Jewish people were compared to them in their eyes, like thorns, like a person's got thorns sticking all over his body, and he can't handle it. So every time they saw the Jewish people, growing as a result of, or despite their efforts to try to oppress them, it was like a thorn in their thigh. It's the modern day expression of the same thing. Okay, let's do one more comment from the Gemara. The next verse 11, chapter 1, verse 13 in Exodus reads, by Avidu Mitzrayim, and the Jews and the Egyptians enslaved them or made them work, as Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, the Farech with top of alphabet base, 11b. Farech means like a hard work or labor. So this word, the Farech, can be translated as follows, two different translations. Not Rav and Shmuel, others. Rabbi Eliezer says the word befarech should be split into two words. The peh, rach, with a soft mouth, soft tongue. In other words, this is something I think you mentioned, where they would soft to say, oh, don't worry about it, just do this, volunteer here, volunteer there, help us out here, don't worry, not a big deal. Soft language, like the pot that's slowly boils the frog, right? And at one point, they're stuck and trapped in this thing. They slowly acclimated them. Thank you. I was going to say the word accustomed, but they acclimated them to servitude to the point that they completely relinquished their independence. Then that's one translation. Another translation is Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani is the opposite. Fricha means with body-breaking pressure, as Rashi puts it, with strong arm them. So two different versions to what happened. Or maybe it's a combination of both. I don't know, but two different versions to translating this word, befarach. Either acclimating them with soft language, or the other way is, that's one way of reading the word befarach. The other way of reading befarach is strong arm them into doing so. Is this a contradiction? Or is just describing two different stages? Because they're not arguing about, it could be, let's rephrase that. They're arguing about the meaning of the word befarach. Now, whatever you translate the word befarach, it doesn't necessarily mean the timeline. In other words, this word befarach could be talking about the beginning stage, or this word befarach could be talking about the end stage, which would mean that the legend of Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani are not arguing about the facts of what happened. They're just arguing over what the word befarach means. Follow what I'm saying? Meaning you could read it to mean that they're arguing about what happened. Did they strong arm them, or did they coax them? Or it could just be, yeah, they're both agreed that they started off by coaxing them and ended off by strong arming them. But the question is, which stage is the word befarach describing? That could be a way of understanding this dispute. It's not a dispute in reality of the ground, but rather just on the question of the translation of the word.
Really surprised that the Jews never caught on to this trick.
Unfortunately, history
They
shows
couldn't foresee.
the original Israelites, the original Jews, were not the only ones, not the first nor the last, to fall for the slow boiling pot. Unfortunately, that's the reality. But more deeply, I mean, God already ordained that the Jews were going to be in the place of suffering before they were redeemed and got the Torah. So this is what God wanted to happen. But you're right. I mean, this is a historical phenomenon. People went along, not assuming that there could be such terrible evil. Right? How bad could it get already? That's kind of the attitude most people take. I'll leave it to the psychologists and the sociologists to explain that. Okay, so we'll stop over here, and God willing, more comments tomorrow on the gradual or the stages and elements of the Jewish enslavement.
Does this word
Befarach, yeah.
Does it come up again in another context?
In scripture?
Scripture that it could be
I don't know. I'm not sure.
No,
You have to look up the Concordinitza. You have to look up the Concordinitza. You have a book called the Concordinitza. You can look at the word up there. It'll tell you everywhere else in. Sorry? Yeah, we have it here in the library. So it'll cross-reference everywhere else in scripture where you might find that. Yeah. Okay, have a wonderful day, buddy. God willing, tomorrow we'll continue more comments on the Jewish enslavement. Have a good day, Alan.
Excellent. Thank you.